Okay, hello everybody. Good morning. Welcome. Let us begin. We are learning today, as we started last week. We're learning about Chanuka versus Shabbos, and the fact that on the one hand, obviously Chanuka candles are a very, very big deal, and yet on the other hand, we learned that if you've got a choice between the two, let's say a person's under financial strain, and you've got to now make a call. Do you buy Chanuka candles or do you buy Shabbos candles? So that was our big discussion that we're talking about in this particular Sikha, that you prioritize Shabbos candles. Okay, great, fine, fantastic, wonderful. That much we get, we understand, we appreciate it. And you could have argued, by the way, that generally in Judaism, whatever is more frequent always takes priority over what is less frequent. So should have been a no-brainer. Shabbos happens every single week. Chanuka only comes around once a year. Should be a no-brainer that if you've got a toss-up between the two, which one do you choose? You choose Shabbos. However, and this is where things start to get interesting. That's what we're going to be learning about, please God, during the course of the next few weeks. It gets interesting when you have a look in the teaching of the Rambam. And the Rambam brings this halacha. What does he say? If a person has the toss-up, you've got the choice between Shabbos or Chanuka candles. You prioritize the Shabbos candles. Why? Because Shabbos candles are to bring peace to the world, or peace to the home. Let's not get carried away with ourselves. Peace to the home. And then he says, and if you've got a toss-up between Kiddush wine and Shabbos candles, you prioritize the Shabbos candles. And then he tells us, the truth of the matter is, you want to know how important peace is? Look, we've got the story of the Soita woman. Here's a guy who suspects that his wife has been unfaithful, and he makes an accusation, and then he can't prove it. So he warns her, don't ever be found in a private space again with so-and-so. Then witnesses come forward to say, well, guess what? She went and she spent time with this guy in this private location. The husband then takes his wife to Jerusalem. They go through a strange process called the Soita process. And part of that strange process is that she has to drink water, not just any water, very specific kind of water, water that has had sand mixed into it, and more importantly for our conversation, has had Hashem's name written on a piece of parchment as part of a paragraph from the Torah, and then Hashem's name is dissolved into the water. There's the point that's important for us. You see, says the Rambam, you see how important peace in the home is. Hashem was willing to allow us to erase his name in the hope that we can resolve this conflict between the husband and wife, and we could restore peace in the home. And then the Rambam goes a step further, and he says, Godoy la shalom. Peace is a great part of Judaism. It's an incredibly important thing. The whole Torah was given for what purpose? For the sake of peace. And he quotes that that the ways of the Torah are peace, and all of its parts are pleasant, and all of its paths are peaceful. So we have a series of questions that we have to try and address on this issue. And the questions go like this. Number one, why does the Rambam get so distracted on the theme of peace? This is a book of laws. He should just simply be telling us, if you have a quandary, what do? You don't have enough money for your Chanuka and Shabbos candles, and you got to choose one of them. Or you don't have enough money for your Kiddush wine and your Shabbos candles, so you got to choose one of them. This is what you do. Thank you. The end. And if you want to tell us that there's a reason, and the reason is because the Shabbos candles represent peace in the home, beautiful, tell us that. And if you even want to prove it from the story of the Soita, wonderful, tell us. But why get into this whole poetic discussion about the beauty and importance of peace, and the whole Torah was given for the sake of peace? Why is that necessary in this conversation? Oh, and by the way, who even says that you can compare the two cases? You're talking about Shabbos candles at your home on a Friday night, and you're trying to prove the power and value of those Shabbos candles based on the Soita story. Let's be honest. The Soita story is a major crisis in this family. They're about to divorce. He's about to kick her out. She's going to lose her ksuva because of her infidelity. There's, like the Gemara says, the Mizbeach, the altar will cry over the dissolution of this marriage. It's really high stakes. Okay, in such a critical situation, Hashem says peace is that important that his name should be erased. But here we're talking about a benign situation. There's no crisis. It's just a toss-up. Should I be lighting Chanuka candles or Shabbos candles this evening? No one's going to lose their family over this. So who says that Shabbos candles are necessarily so compelling that they override Chanuka candles? And then we had another question, or series of questions, more technical, but quite important. The Rambam is a highly methodical author. And when the Rambam crafted his 14-volume Mishnah Torah, which is the most important work of Jewish law that all of our other Shulchan Aruch, contemporary works are all based on, he did it with a tremendous degree of attention, not just to detail, but to flow, to order, to chronology. One of the things the Rambam does in his Mishnah Torah is he makes sure to teach in a way where the subjects keep building on each other, so that when you encounter something for the first time, you deal with all the information that's relevant the first time, and later on, if you come to something which is related to that topic, you already know the information because you've dealt with it. So logically, if the Rambam wants to tell us that Shabbos candles are really, really important, then the right place to do that would be in the laws of, you guessed it, Shabbos candles. Because that's where you're talking about the importance of Shabbos candles. He doesn't. We learn everything to do with Shabbos, including the laws of Shabbos candles, without any mention of how important peace is and how Shabbos candles override Kiddush wine and they override Chanuka candles. Nothing, no conversation about it. Now we've reached the point, much later on in the book of Zmanim, the book that speaks about special occasions on the Jewish calendar and how to celebrate them. Now we eventually get to Chanuka. Now, in the laws of Chanuka, the Rambam wants to tell us the importance of Shabbos candles. It's like a double question. Surely it's a weird place to tell us how important Shabbos candles are because it's not the theme of Shabbos candles. And second of all, why are you discussing a law that is relevant to Shabbos candles later on when the Rambam typically always discusses things first opportunity, which would have been the logical opportunity in the laws of Shabbos candles? So clearly there must be something going on over here, both with regards to Shabbos and with regards to Chanuka that we are missing. Let's try and see if we can understand. Let's got to get to the place of where we left off last week. You will remember last week we skipped a piece that was in brackets because we ran out of time. So we've got to go back to that as well. Okay, so where are we? Sorry. So we started the question about why it is that he brings it up in the laws of Chanuka. I'm sorry, I should have done this before we started, was to get to the correct place, and I didn't do that. So there was no basically we did that. Oh, that was another point that we said, is that if you have a look in the Shulchan Aruch, you will see that the Shulchan Aruch brings this in the laws of Shabbos candles. So how come the Rambam does differently? Okay, let's just go straight to the next piece. It's probably easier than trying to find the piece of brackets that we left out last week. Let's get straight down to what it is. So if you can see it in front of you, obviously, we are currently at what's called Ois Daled. That's over there. You see that? Ois Daled, right at the bottom of the set of the first column on the page. Okay, so let's begin an explanation. We had many questions about the way that the Rambam has constructed this particular set of laws. We have many questions about Shabbos and Chanuka candles. By the way, whether you've thought about it or not, you should have questions just generally. So what is the message of Shabbos candles and what is the message of Chanuka candles and so on? So let's begin a journey of answering those questions. Let's begin the explanation by saying the following. We're going to the top of the thing. Zog the Rambam in Hilches Shabbos, As das is bichlal oineg Shabbos un lichvoid Shabbos. Okay, you know how these things work. If you want to understand something, there are two ways that you can answer a question. The way that people like to answer questions and the way that people should answer questions. So the way that people like to answer questions is, oh, you want an answer? Here you go. You ask the question, I'll show you how clever I am. There's an answer. And hopefully the person says, oh, I never thought of that. Thank you very much. Now it's settled. Now there's the way that you should answer a question. The way you should answer a question is, whoa, hang on a second. You want to understand the topic. Let's first understand the topic. And hopefully we'll do such a good job of explaining this topic that you'll then realize there actually is no question in the first place. So that's generally how we like to answer questions in the approach of Chassidus. Don't just spew an answer as a knee-jerk reaction to a question. Let's explore. Okay, you want to talk about Shabbos candles? Let's understand, why do we light Shabbos candles in the first place? What's the goal? What's the objective? What are we trying to achieve? Go back to the laws of Shabbos in the Rambam, because we're learning what the Rambam says about Chanuka candles and what he says about Shabbos candles in that context. So let's park that for a few moments and let's go back to when the Rambam introduced the law of Shabbos candles in the first place. What does he say? You see, if something is part of the experience of Shabbos, then naturally, logically, it must fit into one of the categories of what the Torah expects us to do on Shabbos. What does the Torah expect of us on Shabbos? It expects us what's called shamor v'zochor, which means that there's an element of Shabbos we have to watch and guard that we do not transgress. So those are all the don'ts of Shabbos. Don't cook, don't harvest or plant, don't do all kinds of things that fit into the 39 categories of forbidden work. Plus, there is zochor. There's a positive commandment to remember Shabbos, which means you make kiddush at the beginning, you make havdalah at the end. The Gemara tells us you remember Shabbos all week long. So as you go through your shopping during the course of the week, you keep in mind, oh, maybe this would be good to have for Shabbos. You mention Shabbos every single day in the davening. Today is the first day from Shabbos, and so on and so forth. You constantly remember Shabbos. Those are the halachas of Shabbos that are written in the Torah itself. We then derive from the prophets that in addition to that, there are two other things that we have to do on Shabbos as well. One is called Oineg Shabbos, right? That the Yeshaya Hanavi tells us that we have to enjoy Shabbos. And the other is Lichvoid HaShabbos, that you have to give honor to Shabbos. So that's in addition to the fact that the Torah tells us Shomer v'Zachor, that there's certain behaviors we have to avoid and there's certain behaviors we have to dafka do. In addition to that, we have a mitzvah to enjoy Shabbos and to honor Shabbos. So how do you enjoy Shabbos? Go back and look in the Rambam, and he'll tell you, how do you enjoy Shabbos? You have fine foods on Shabbos. You sleep on Shabbos. You know, various things that are pleasurable to the human being, you do them specifically on Shabbos. So perhaps all week long, you're supposed to really watch your diet, not only because you've got to watch the calories and you've got to be healthy, but because spiritually, we're not supposed to be so invested in the materialistic experience of this world. So all week long, we keep arm's length away from the physical experiences. Shabbos, you indulge. Oineg Shabbos, it's the pleasure and joy of Shabbos. Secondly, you have something that is called kavod. What's kavod? The Rambam defines kavod is you wear nice clothing, you set your table with your finest dishes, so you give the impression, you put a white tablecloth, you give the impression, this is a day of honor, day that we show honor. So when it comes to lighting candles for Shabbos, the Rambam classifies that Shabbos candles actually belong to both of those categories. It's part of the enjoyment of Shabbos. How's it enjoyable? Because you know what it's like. You know what it's like because you live in South Africa, so you know what it's like to eat a meal in the dark. Not enjoyable. It's not nice. Obviously, in those days, there was no electricity. So what did it mean to have an enjoyable meal? Light up the dining room, have candles, make it bright, so it's an enjoyable experience. It's also part of kavod. In the same way as you put a nice white tablecloth and you put out your china and your silverware, so you put out candles because that shows that this is a special day and you show it honor. What's missing? What's missing? That's the Rambam's definition of why we light Shabbos candles. Why? To enjoy Shabbos, to honor Shabbos. What's missing? Schreibt aber nicht in Hilchas Shabbos, as das ist zu lieb Shalom Bayis. When the Rambam talks about lighting candles on Shabbos, he doesn't say a word about the fact that it is part of Shalom Bayis, bringing peace in the home. Whoa, that should hit you square between the eyes. We've just seen that when he talks about the laws of Chanuka, and he has to address as a sidebar the concept of Shabbos candles, because he's just got to work out which one takes priority if you've only got funds for either Shabbos or Chanuka candles. There, the Rambam suddenly says, Shalom Bayis, peace, and peace is so important, and the whole Torah was given for peace. But when he spoke about the laws of Shabbos candles initially, and he introduced us to those laws, not a word, nothing about Shalom Bayis, nothing about peace. And just if you want to understand the nature of what peace means, he says parenthetically over here, based on the Gemara, that what it means is Shaloi Yikoshel Be'etzoi Be'evan. We actually discussed this already before. Peace means that if your house is illuminated, you're not going to bump into furniture and hurt yourself. Or you could say that the peace is because nobody enjoys sitting in the dark. Whichever argument it might be, he does not say that peace in the home is integral to the Shabbos candles when he introduces the Shabbos candles. This is a glaring question. As Ner Shabbos is in Yonah Shalom Beisoi, considering that in the laws of Chanuka, as we have just seen, the Rambam makes a big deal about how Shabbos candles are for the sake of peace in the home, right? As Shabbos is in Yonah Shalom Beisoi, is it not the most logical, rational, glaring, obvious thing that when the Rambam spoke about the laws of Shabbos first time around, he should have then said, and you light candles for peace in your home? Now, there's two possibilities, right? You could either sit here thinking, oy vey, what? What happened over here? The Rambam overlooked in the laws of Shabbos something which is integral to the laws of Shabbos? Or you could say, maybe it's not integral. Let's see. Is there fun move on from the fact that the Rambam omitted, when he introduced the law of Shabbos candles, he omitted to say that it brings with it Shalom Bayis, peace in the home? That indicates as Leut Rambam is der etzem achiev for Ner Shabbos nit lib Shalom Bayis nor lib kavod v'oineg. The Rambam's just made a very important statement and clarification for us, that he obviously believes the main reason you have Shabbos candles is why? To show honor to Shabbos and have pleasure on Shabbos. Shalom Bayis, peace in the home, is not the main reason for Shabbos candles. This is important information for us because it will help us to reconstitute in our own minds what's going on over here with regards to Shabbos candles. So at this point in time, what have we just discovered, which is quite earth-shattering? We have discovered that the Rambam's view is that the primary purpose of Shabbos candles is that your Shabbos will be enjoyable and that your Shabbos will be honorable. In other words, you'll show honor to Shabbos because you illuminate your home. The fact that there'll be peace in your family is not a priority and not the primary reason why we light Shabbos candles. Very interesting. Und auf Alpia durch Ner Shabbos wird aufgetan, bevor all der Inyan von Shalom Bayis ist aber nicht das der Geder v'tam ha-mitzvah. So what's the Rambam effectively telling us? And this is where you got to pay attention to nuance, because in Torah, nuances are very, very important. And in halacha, in Jewish law, nuances can make the difference between what you need to do and what you don't need to do. So the Rambam's telling us over here, there is an important nuance. If I need to define what the halacha is, if I need to define why we light Shabbos candles, if I want to appreciate and understand what the message and the purpose of Shabbos candles is, So the message and purpose of Shabbos candles is that Shabbos should have pleasure and honor. Do Shabbos candles also bring peace to the home? Yes, they do. Of course, it's a fact. If your house is well lit, it feels good. People don't bump into things. Practically, it does add to the peace in the home. Is that the motivating reason why to light Shabbos candles? According to the Rambam, no, that's a side benefit, not a motivating reason. Okay, we get that. That could be understood under normal circumstances, except that based on what we know from the Rambam's view about Chanuka and how Chanuka candles compare to Shabbos candles, this now seems to be a total contradiction. Mishum shloim beisai. Shloim beisai is doch nit the geder achiv mitzvah. Rambam, you seem to be contradicting yourself over here. If we had to construct this thing and put it into almost like a chronological, sequential building of a law in Torah, it would work like this. You have to light Shabbos candles. Step one, you have to light Shabbos candles. Step two, why do you have to light Shabbos candles? Well, there's two reasons. Firstly, because you have to show honor to Shabbos, and the candles will honor Shabbos. Secondly, because you have to enjoy Shabbos, and it will be enjoyable for you to eat food that you can see. Those are the two steps in the conversation around Shabbos. Fast forward. Now we have a question that arises. What happens if it's Shabbos Chanuka? And I don't have enough money for both. Now I need an halachic ruling. Do I buy Shabbos candles or do I buy Chanuka candles? So step three in the process, the Rambam says, you buy Shabbos candles. Why? Logically, the Rambam has told me I have to have Shabbos candles to honor Shabbos, and I have to have Shabbos candles to enjoy Shabbos. So logically, if he has now told me that I have to override the Chanuka candles in order to have Shabbos candles, you'd expect him to say, why? Because honor and pleasure of Shabbos are that important. And he doesn't. He doesn't. He says, Ner beisoy adif mishum shaloim beisoy. He says that the Shabbos candles take precedence over the Chanuka candles because you need to have peace in your home. But you didn't tell me that that's why we have Shabbos candles. You never mentioned it. So how can you suddenly use it now as your defense of why the Shabbos candles take preference? Shalom beisoy is doch nit the geder achiv v'hamitzvah. You, Rambam, did not define the mitzvah of Shabbos candles as being for peace. So why now are you using peace as the reason to explain why you have to have Shabbos candles over the Chanuka candles? Do you see the contradiction? It's pretty glaring. So, you know, there's an expression that a wise question is already part of the answer. This is a smart question. It's a smart question because what are we saying? Why? Not this question, sorry, a previous question. Said, why did the Rambam only bring up the issue of peace in the home being related to the Shabbos candles only in the laws of Chanuka candles? That was one of our original questions. That was a smart question. Let's see. That's why the Rambam only brought up the issue of the toss-up between Chanuka candles and Shabbos candles, which is going to be determined based on the principle of peace in the home. He does not mention that in the laws of Shabbos. He only mentions it in the laws of Chanuka. Why? Why? So I'll give you the overview first before we read it inside. Why? Because peace in the home is not part of the law of Shabbos candles. Therefore, it doesn't get discussed in the laws of Shabbos candles. Okay, so you'll say, still, that was your motivation to allow the Shabbos candles to override the Chanuka candles. You're right, we'll discuss that. And you'll need to appreciate that it won't be because of the laws of Shabbos candles, it'll be for a different reason, as we shall see. by the way, part of the construction, the intellectual construction that we're now going to build will also help us to understand why the Rambam had to bring a proof, the proof from the story of the Soita woman, etc., to prove to us the importance of peace. Can you see the logic over here? If peace is part of Shabbos candles, I wouldn't need to prove that peace is important. But now we see that Shabbos candles are not motivated by peace. It's a side benefit that they provide. The real reason you have to light Shabbos candles is because you have to honor Shabbos. Then, if I want to show that peace is important, I'm going to have to prove that peace is important. Right now, this all might sound just a little abstract. That's okay, because over the next few paragraphs, as we put it all together, it should become quite clear. So der mit is mechadesh, what the Rambam intends to teach us, and it's quite an innovative teaching and insight, as das was ner beisoi koide mishum shaloim beisoi. The fact that Shabbos candles override Chanuka candles when they are neck and neck. Why? Because Shabbos candles have the element of peace, is as nit ageder in ner Shabbos. That is not because of anything to do with the laws of Shabbos. As in dem besteht der Adifos von ner Shabbos und is damit durch ner Chanuka. As if to say, well, the laws of Shabbos require candles for peace, and that overrides Chanuka. No, that is not our argument. The law is not that the candles of Shabbos have to bring peace. And by the way, that's practical, right? Because we said that the definition of peace is that people don't bump into furniture. So that would imply that your Shabbos candles have to be all over your house. Now, is that how we do Shabbos candles in practice? No. We do Shabbos candles specifically in the place that we eat. So that in itself tells you that there's a practical difference to say that Shabbos candles are to honor Shabbos, not to create peace in the home. Because to honor Shabbos, I can honor Shabbos in my dining room. There you go. See Shabbos, I've shown you honor. I have to enjoy Shabbos. Well, where am I going to enjoy Shabbos? When I eat food, because as we very well know, even though dining in the dark is a kind of fad that seems to have taken off in some places. But generally speaking, how do people eat? You like to see what you're eating. It adds to the pleasure of the experience. So where's that? In the dining room? Whereas if the reason I needed to have Shabbos candles was to bring peace in my home, that nobody should bump into furniture, it would be a different law. You'd be lighting Shabbos candles in every room. And yes, you would argue that today we have electric lights, so perhaps we don't have to do that, but maybe back then they would have. So the Rambam wants us to be clear. There is no requirement of Shabbos candles to create peace in your home. That is a beautiful side benefit. So that's what the Rambam is again emphasizing in these laws of Chanuka, that the fact that Shabbos candles add to the peace of your home is not integral to the law of Shabbos candles. So why do you have Shabbos candles? In order to honor Shabbos. And then once we're on the topic, nor what the Rambam is telling us over here is really, really interesting. And for anybody who doesn't have a yeshiva background, you're not necessarily used to the style of learning. You think, whoa, I'm trying to follow this. And there's a lot of nuance and detail over here. And it's all just a little bit abstract. It's actually quite simple what he's saying. Effectively, what he's telling us is this. In everything that exists within Judaism, there are the laws. And then there are the almost atmospheric kind of residual elements of a mitzvah. Let's say, for example, step out of Shabbos for a second, just to illustrate this. Let's say, for example, why do we keep kosher? Why? Because the Torah says that you keep kosher. And in fact, there's certain elements of Torah that we're told are specifically not rational, like the mixture of meat and milk. It doesn't have a rational basis. So why do we do it? Because the Torah says so. And why do we do it? If you really want to delve just a little bit deeper, it's because the characteristics associated with non-kosher animals are characteristics that we don't want to have in our lives. And what you eat becomes absorbed into your reality. And we don't want to be predators and scavengers and cruel beings. And so therefore we eat only the kind of foods that will bring a person a more docile, kind of tranquil personality. Now, some people will tell you, that there's great scientific research to indicate that certain of the processes associated with kosher food are actually healthy. So certain kinds of seafood are associated with certain kinds of dread diseases. And the fact that we drain blood out of an animal before we're allowed to eat its meat might have to do with other health considerations. So people will turn around and say, wow, how brilliant is the Torah? You see that? If you keep kosher, you'll be healthy. Maybe that's true. And maybe it's not. Because maybe if you keep kosher, you eat such healthy things like cholent, or you overeat as we do at Simchas and at Shabbos tables and so on and so forth. So what is their guarantee? Just because you eat kosher, you're going to be healthy? No, it's a side benefit. If there are health benefits of keeping kosher, they are side benefits. They're not the reason for the mitzvah. Shabbos. Why do you keep Shabbos? Why do we keep Shabbos? Why? Because the Torah says that we have to acknowledge that Hashem is in control of the world. Ki sheishes yamim, that Hashem created the world in 6 days and he rested on the 7th. And likewise, we should let go and relinquish control that we imagine we have over our lives for one day in the week, so that we appreciate Hashem is actually in control. That's why we keep Shabbos. You're going to say Shabbos is healthy because you get to breathe for 24 hours? Side benefit. You'll say Shabbos is healthy because we're too fixated on technology and we need a technology break for one day a week? Side benefit. You're going to say Shabbos is a wonderful time for people to sit around the table and talk to their families, which is quite absent in the 21st century? Side benefit. Is that why we do it? No. Is it a benefit? Yes. Now you have to ask yourself the question, is that benefit also a Jewish value? The benefit of human health, is that a Jewish value? Yes. So if there was a consideration about kosher food that was outside of the halachic realm, we weren't asking a question over here about whether you should or shouldn't eat this, whether it's kosher or not, but whether there was a question, let's say for argument's sake, about overindulging, you're going to say the value of Judaism is health. You shouldn't overindulge, even if it's kosher. Is spending time with your family a Jewish value? Absolutely. Absolutely 100%. So therefore, if it's not Shabbos, you also should spend time with your family. You don't say, oh, Shabbos is that day. So likewise over here. Why do we light Shabbos candles? Because we are obligated to show honor to Shabbos by lighting candles. We are obligated to enjoy the experience of Shabbos by lighting candles. But if something should emerge, and there's now a question about a Jewish value, is a side benefit of those candles that there's peace in the home? Yes. So is peace a Jewish value that should extend beyond just the Shabbos experience? Yes, it is. That's what the Rambam wants us to know. That peace is a Jewish value. So if I find something in Jewish practice that also carries the theme of peace, I get really excited. I say, wow, look at this. Here is a mitzvah. I do the mitzvah for other reasons, but it carries this incredibly important theme called peace. Let's ramp that up. Let's highlight that. That's a big deal. Peace is a big deal for us Jews. So therefore, das, was am mitzvah wird aufgestupt zu libinyan ha-sholem. It says, nicht der Gede von der Chias am Mitzvah, nor me is mekayim dabei me ein Mitzvah zoi, was wird befehl abgelegt zu Psalm Kidel Kamon. So now the Rambam is teaching us something mind-blowing. I've got 2 mitzvahs. I've got to choose. I can only do one of them. One mitzvah is to light Shabbos candles. One mitzvah is to light Chanuka candles. Neither one of those 2 mitzvahs is mandated directly in the Torah. Torah does not say, thou shalt light Shabbos candles. In fact, in the language of the Rambam, it's something that is not exactly a mitzvah. It is not exactly reshus, which means that it's optional. It is a chiyuv. It's almost like a moral obligation, as opposed to a mitzvah obligation. Okay, so we have to do it in spite of the fact that it's not written in the Torah. Is Chanuka written in the Torah? Obviously not, because it only happened historically after the Torah had already been given. So you've got 2 laws that technically are of equal footing. One of them's got to give, because I've only got enough money for 1 set of candles. So I say, how do I make this decision? Says the Rambam. I have a look at each one of them and I say, besides their halachic parameters, what do they imply? Shabbos candles imply peace. Now here's the bombshell. Here's the incredible insight. If something gets moved for the sake of peace, then it's actually not really removed. And he'll explain this to us. In other words, if I do something for the purpose of peace, it doesn't get diminished, weakened, or displaced in favor of peace. It becomes part of the process of peace. Okay, we'll discuss this further. He's going to talk about it in the next piece, in the next paragraph. So when we get there, it will become a little bit more clear. Let's bring it back to us. Das was ner beise koidem mishlum shloim beise. The fact that the Rambam writes that if you've got a choice between your Chanuka candles and your Shabbos candles, you prioritize your Shabbos candles because they represent peace. Izoich mitzad dem gede v'toichen von Chanuka was a teil von kol ha-Torah shenitne l'sholem and l'asei sholem. What's the Rambam telling us? Chanuka is a holiday that belongs to the Torah. And now you should start to see, by the way, why he said all these words, how great peace is and how he ramped it up. Why? Because he's not talking about a detail of Shabbos candles. He's teaching us about the whole of Judaism. The whole of Judaism is for the sake of peace. The Torah was given to increase peace in our world. So now, Chanuka candles are part of Torah. That means that a sub-theme of Chanuka candles also is the theme of peace. Not only Shabbos candles, Chanuka candles also carry the theme of peace because they're part of Torah. Like every single mitzvah and every single Jewish practice is all overarchingly the theme of peace. Hat der Rambam gestellt dem Din in Hilches Chanuka, so scheuer sein, als das ist eine Dechia von Chanuka, no so ist euch mechayev the Inyan von Chanuka. The Rambam alludes to this in a crafty way. See, there are two choices he had. He has to discuss the dilemma of the Shabbos candles versus the Chanuka candles. He has to discuss it. He only has two choices as to where to discuss it. Either you discuss this in the laws of Shabbos candles, which seem to be a very logical place, or you discuss it in the laws of Chanuka candles, which is equally logical, but kind of just, one step removed because it should have happened earlier. Which one does the Rambam choose? He chooses to discuss it in the laws of Chanuka. Now, think for a second what's going on over here. We are displacing one mitzvah in favor of another mitzvah. Straight away, whether you like it or not, the nature of our minds is we say, oh, so it's obviously the less important mitzvah because that's why it got displaced. Right? Is that not how we think? You've got two things to choose between. Typically, you choose the one that's more important. So if I displace one mitzvah, that seems to be evidence that that mitzvah is less important. Now, if the conversation about displacing that mitzvah would have happened in the laws of Shabbos, then you'd be 100% convinced that Shabbos is more important than Chanuka. Because look, where do we discuss it? In the laws of Shabbos. What do we choose? The laws of Shabbos. What do we displace? The laws of Chanuka. Clearly, Chanuka is less important than Shabbos. So the Rambam doesn't do that. Instead, he says, we'll dafka discuss this in the laws of Chanuka. So that what you'll come out with is you'll say, within the way that you celebrate Chanuka, part of the law of Chanuka is that sometimes Chanuka gives way for Shabbos. You hear that inflection? You hear that difference? If it was part of the laws of Shabbos is that we override Chanuka, then it makes it sound like Chanuka is less important. But if it's part of the laws of Chanuka, how you celebrate Chanuka under these circumstances is you let go of the Chanuka candles and I say, guess what? It's still part of Chanuka. Chanuka is still happening. Chanuka is still alive. And the particular way that Chanuka is celebrated under these particular circumstances is ironically by not lighting Chanuka candles. That's where you see peace. That's the theme of peace. Peace means that you don't compromise or relinquish one in the favor of the other. That's how people always think of peace. What's peace? How do you make peace? Somebody's got to give something up for the sake of peace. Chanukah's got to give up the opportunity to be Chanukah in order that we can have peace and have Shabbos. No, that's not a Jewish view of peace. The Jewish view of peace is you go to the core and you say, at the core, we are at peace. at the core. It's not that I surrender for you to be able to express yourself. It's that in this particular way, in this particular situation, the way that I express myself is by being quiet and listening to you. It's not a conflict. That's not a compromise. That's not a diminution of one person in order to build the other. It's an understanding. That peace means we always work together and we always empower each other. And if today is Chanuka, we'll empower Chanuka today. How? By saying this kind of a Chanuka does not require Chanuka candles. Because on this kind of a Chanuka, where you can only afford one, the Shabbos candles are good enough for this kind of Chanuka. In order to prove his point, because the Rambam's making an incredibly powerful point. So in order to prove his point, he says, look, here's an example of where you see how powerful peace is and the need for peace is. You take Hashem's name and you dissolve it in water in order to have peace. Shalom is nit nor azoy grois as redem is min doiche dem haben is von mechikas Hashem. He says, look at that story. Here you've got this couple in dire straits, desperate for resolution. They come to the great high court in Jerusalem. And what do? We don't just say, okay, look, you've got a terrible, terrible crisis. We've got a piece of parchment with Hashem's name on it that Hashem has mandated and allowed us to be able to erase in order to resolve your problem. So let's go to the archives, pull out that parchment and dissolve it into the water, because it's a serious thing to erase Hashem's name, but restoring your family stability is even more serious. Let's do it. That's not how the story goes. They don't go to the archives. What do? What do? We call a scribe and we sit him down with a fresh piece of parchment. And we say to the scribe, please write these words from the Torah. Write Hashem's name. The only reason we will have this particular line with this particular name of Hashem will only be so that we could erase it. Isn't that fascinating? It's mind-blowing. Here we are deliberately creating a name of Hashem to destroy. Torah tells us you're not allowed to erase Hashem's name, and we are not only erasing Hashem's name, but we're writing Hashem's name with the sole intention to erase it. Why? Mitzvahs ksivas Hashem bikdushosoi v'toikvoi is poil when is gale durch dem was wird nimchak wie bald as das bringt shalom ben ish li ishtoi. Because you know what's happening over here under ordinary circumstances. Where do you see Hashem? Where Hashem is revealed. So you open up the Torah and you see Hashem's name. You say, oh, there's God. Look at that. There's God. His name is written over there. The ineffable name of Hashem is written on that piece of parchment. Wow, divine revelation. Here, where's God? Where do I see God? I see God being erased in order to reveal God, if that makes sense. It's exactly what you wouldn't expect. It's completely counterintuitive. That in the absence, you actually notice him more than in his presence. Where is Hashem more? Think of this in human terms. Think of this in human terms. We can all relate to this. A parent, a mother in particular. Where do you see the mother more? When she's walking alongside her child who's dressed to the nines and has, exuding nachas. Wow, everybody turns around, such a nice kid, so well behaved, so well groomed. Is that where you see the mother? Or do you see the mother where she's collapsing in some kind of a crisis where the child needs tremendous attention? The child, God forbid, is not well or going through some emotional episode and is lashing out and isn't behaving and there's mess and it's hard and it's tiring and it's overtime. Where do you see the mother more? Where she is or where she is not? Where do you see the mother more? Where she helps her child up off the floor or where she steps back and says, you can do it. Stand. Come on. You're almost there. You could stand. Where do you see Hashem more? Where his name is emblazoned all over the place. God, 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 like you look in the Torah. Or where his name is designed to be removed so that he can bring people together, bring a couple back to harmony. That's shalom. Real peace is not the peacemaker, the Nobel Peace Prize winner, the individual who everybody cheers because they did such a great job of bringing people together when they were in conflict. Where do you see peace? Where's is real peace? The individual who is willing to dissolve themselves. There's a verse from Rabbi Yitzchak Avorki, who was a great Hasidic master. He says, why is sugar sweet? Because sugar is willing to dissolve. Why is Chanuka beautiful when you're not lighting Chanuka candles? Because that Chanuka is supporting peace. That Chanuka is expressing the value of peace. Well, peace, was der Rambam is medaik zu schreiben, ner beisoi koidem. One of the distinctions that we alluded to right at the beginning of this, or didn't allude to, we mentioned right at the beginning of the Sikha, is we said, how come it is that the Rambam writes that if it's a choice between the Chanuka and Shabbos candles go first, they take precedence, whereas if you look in the Shulchan Aruch, it says that the Shabbos candles are adif, which implies that they're more important. Now we can answer that question too. Now we understand why the Rambam uses terminology that is different to his original source, which is the Gemara, where they said ner beisoy odif. They said that the candles of Shabbos are better or stronger because odif can get touched very nice. The mitzvah ner Shabbos hat an adifus legabe der zweite ner Chanukah und es der verdoiche die zweite mitzvah. The reason the Rambam avoided the word adif is because adif means that it overrides. So if I've got Shabbos candles on the one hand and Chanukah candles on the other hand, and I need to decide which one do I light if I can only afford one of them, if I would say adif, the implication would be, oh, Shabbos candles are better, more important, more valuable, so they override Chanukah candles. The Rambam didn't want to say it. Because the Rambam's message over here, and the entire structure, the intellectual structure of the Rambam's argument is that this is not a question of which is the bigger mitzvah. This is not a question of which one carries more weight, so to speak, in the spiritual realms. This is a question of how, in these circumstances, do we fulfill the theme and mandate of Torah, which is peace. So therefore, is the Rambam medayek as odif do meint blois koidem. Therefore, the Rambam specifies that in this particular case, the word adif only means comes first. Die Gemara meint mit dem bloi sagen dem din as in hadlocke befeuer, wenn hat nor auf eine von sei, is ner beisoi koidem. The Rambam wants to highlight for us that the Gemara's intention over here is just to say only one of them can be done in practice. So if I have to choose between the two, Shabbos and Chanukah candles, which one should be done in practice? In practice, the Shabbos candles have to go first because they represent peace. But does that mean Shabbos candles are, in a sense, more important than Chanukah candles? No, it doesn't. So what do we have so far? We'll pause at this point because it's we don't have enough time to start the next section. So what does that teach us? What have we derived so far? Quite an incredible insight. We believed initially that the Rambam seemed to be off the mark over here, talking about a subject that should have been dealt with much earlier in the laws of Shabbos and only bringing it up in the laws of Chanuka. We don't really understand initially, we didn't understand why the Rambam went on this whole lyrical explanation, of peace and how important peace is. Now we get it. Because the Rambam steers clear of trying to make an halachic distinction that the law of Shabbos candles is more important or more of a priority than the law of Chanukah candles. He didn't want to say that at all because the law of Shabbos candles is founded in a different concept, the idea of showing honor and pleasure for Shabbos. Instead, the Rambam wanted to teach us a beautiful insight into Judaism across the board. What is that? Judaism is focused on peace. In this particular situation, the way in which you will achieve peace is by Chanukah stepping back to allow Shabbos to have the, so to speak, center stage at this point. That will exude and represent the main theme of what Judaism is all about, peace in the world. Now, are we done with this? Far from it. There's quite a lot more that we have to learn specifically about the power of peace, which please God will continue next week. I'll just quickly change the muting settings so people can unmute, in case anybody has a question that you'd like to ask. No questions or comments. That's usually either a good sign or a bad sign, right? Either it means that everybody understood everything or nobody understood anything.